Hello, hello, hello. We are going to work on a table runner today, and it is called Jewel Box, and it is a free pattern that was designed by Donna Jordan for Jordan Fabrics. So I'm using this color palette, if you will, to create this. And on blue paper, it doesn't really show up as well as it could, but I'm going with batiks. And I want to use blue batik for the background and the border. So I opted to use scraps and I cut out all of my scraps. So here are my 5-inch squares. These are typically called charm squares when you buy them in 5-inch as 5-inch pre-cuts. But I just went ahead and cut out some of the fabric that I already have in my stash. Equally so, I also cut out my background and I already drew the diagonal line for the half square triangles. For this particular pattern, they have used all charm squares. However, in order to save time, I am going to use 2.5-inch strips. What they tell you to do in the pattern is to take a 5-inch square and cut this in half and then in half again, vertically and horizontally. So you get these 2.5-inch squares. So instead of doing it that way, I said I could just strip piece it. It would be easier and it would be more efficient considering the fact that I have more possible strips in my stash in my stash of scraps than I do if I tried to get 5 inches. So that's what I'm working on. So we're going to start with our half square triangles. And in order to get started with our half square triangles, we are going to take a color block and a solid block and lay them right sides together. We're going to take these to our machine and we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch on either side. So the line is our cutting line, and you can see that right there. Yep. And we're going to just stitch a 1/4 inch on either side. Okay. I am using my 1/4 inch foot. That is going to allow me to get as close to a 1/4 inch as I possibly can. Now I can do one block at a time like this. Flip this around and then do the other side. Or I can do them all on one side and then come back and do them all on the other side. That's totally up to you. But let's go ahead and get these blocks done. So the great thing and what I try to do with patterns is to look for different ways and easier ways in terms of tips and tricks when we're working on them, because sometimes if you have to alter the pattern like I did in this case because I used scraps and not actual charm squares that were already pre-cut, then want to be able to show you that this can still be done. Also, if you get vintage patterns that are a little bit older, sometimes they will teach you to cut the squares in half before you sew. And when we are using any type of square that is cut on a diagonal, you are cutting and or sewing it on the bias. And the bias is the stretchiest way of your fabric. And so what happens is if you do a lot of pulling with it, it will cause your fabric to wave or warp. And then it just kind of pulls it out of proportion, if you will. So it can make it a little longer than what we expect. So by doing them two at a time, even though it could still pull, you run less of a chance of pulling it as much. So we're just taking these, we're placing them on top. And again, that's totally up to you whether you want to chain piece them like I'm doing right now or do them one at a time. I tend to think that chain piecing is faster, but different people have different preferences. Batiks tend, because of the way that they're dyed, to have really like no front, no back. Now sometimes there's like prints on it, or sometimes the dye didn't quite dye both sides, and you may decide, okay, this is really the dominant side, or this is the back, if you will. And sometimes when you look at it, you just can't tell. But if you feel like, you can go with the side that feels like it's the prettier side, and just take those two pieces and place them together, pretty sides together. Okay, let's turn these around and go back the other way. So the pattern calls for us to do this to 12 of the dark and 12 of the color pieces. So I think I'm doing 16 because I think in my mind I said I'm doing an extra block. Because I thought the table runner would be a little too short at 53 inches. So I said, if I add on another one, it'll be almost 65. So I think 65 will be a little bit better than the 53, a little longer. And I may not finish it. No, I will finish it. Because I use all scrap and I know I don't have enough of the blue to make another set. So if I had enough of the blue, I could probably make another square. Another quilt block, but I'm not going to be able to. So this is going to yield me at least 3 or 4 quilt blocks when I finish. So we're just going all the way through these. This one I did first. So this is what it looks like. Hard to see it on that side. I'm using black thread. So let's turn it over this way so you can see it. And then in between would be the cutting. Okay, let's pull these out. So they're all chained together. And we're just snipping to separate them from each other. Okay, so we have those done. We have these left to go. It's amazing. I did just half. Okay, so the great thing is that I did pre-draw the lines on these prior to. So that's normally how I would set this up. And these blue ones, for some reason, are a little shorter, a little smidge smaller than the color ones. I don't know how that happened. But I use 2 different rulers. So rule number 1, don't use 2 different rulers. Always use the same ruler because it'll hopefully guarantee that you get the same cut. So we're going to pray that the colored ones are a little bit bigger than the blue ones. But if they're not, we can adjust all of them to make it work. So we're just, again, we're lining everything up, getting it centered, taking it to our machine, and then in this case, I'm just chain stitching. Now we will also find out if Jennifer cut these out correctly and cut out exactly 16. Because if she didn't, we're going to have to cut out a couple more. But it looks like we may have be right for once in our lives. And again, this just came from doing the scraps. So typically, if I use the charm squares, I just would have counted out the number that I need. Again, the pattern itself calls for 12. I am doing 16. So the same way that I am making a longer table runner is the same way you can figure out the measurements and make yourself a quilt out of these blocks by making more of them, making more rows, and joining them all together. The same way that you can take a quilt pattern, take their blocks, and just make a table runner out of them. So you have the flexibility of making as many blocks as you would like, and then achieving whatever you want. So you could make a pillow, just make one block. Okay, we're swinging these around to do the other side. So one block would make a pillow. You could use it for a tote bag. You could use it for the back of a project bag. So you could use one for just one thing. You could make the blocks and again make the table runner or wall hanging. Or you could take a lot of blocks and you can make them into a quilt. You could also mix the blocks if you like by using blocks of the same size or framing them out with borders to make them all the same size. And the great thing is that this is pulling each one up because they're still all chained together, so I didn't break the chain. It's up to you to decide whether you want to break that chain or not. I love how the fact that it just flows one into the other because I didn't break that chain. Okay, we did this one. And you can see this one just a little bit better because it's pink. Okay, so we have 2 stitch lines on either side. We're just cutting in between to separate them. I'll make sure my iron is warming up as I'm doing the next part. Okay. So either using, I have a smaller straight edge over there, but too much like right to get it. So either using my straight edge, lining the straight edge up with that line that we drew, we can just cut on either side. Now you can either use your straight edge and guarantee that you don't go wobbly, or you can go rogue and just do it like that. That's totally up to you which way you prefer. As long as you can keep your arm steady or your hand steady, you can do it without the straight edge. So for every square every set of squares that we sew together, it is going to yield us 2 half square triangles. I can even turn this on the back, just making sure that it's lined up correctly. So it really doesn't even matter which way it goes. Even if it's a little wonky and a little off, just try to get it centered. And sometimes it'll get a little wonky and it'll be a little off because sometimes I like to do what's called a scant quarter inch. And so a scant quarter inch is when you are using a little less than a quarter inch and usually defined by like a hair or two. Like that's the difference. So you're not doing anything really thick. You want it the same size as a hair. So let's do another trick. You can line all the lines up. And I mean, really line the lines up. Okay? So I can line them up on this. Because that way I can see the lines. So I'm using this line right here. And I can line them up. Yep. Make sure everything is the way it's supposed to be. And then you could take your straight edge and it gives you all of those cuts at one time. So there are some people that do it that way. Not necessarily my favorite way because it requires my hand to be accurate. I don't have any extra glue. I don't want to mess it up. But that's not saying that I won't mess it up even with doing it the way that I am one at a time. But you could absolutely line them up and do multiple ones. And this is the last one that I need to cut like this. Okay. So these are all cut. We're going to slide these out the way just so I can get to my iron. You can choose how you want to press for your half square triangles. If you want to press to the dark side, lay your fabric colored side on the bottom, or it could be the lighter side, whichever way you decided to go with your colorway. You want the side that you want the seam pressed to be up top. We'll open that up and we give it a good press. So the whole thing is to make sure that we're not ironing our fabric, we're just pressing our fabric. Sometimes you'll get a little bit of a lip right there because everything wasn't laying flat. So you can just use your iron and press a little bit more, hopefully to get it to lay a little flatter. Sometimes it doesn't want to lay as flat as we would like it to lay when you're pressing that seam to one side. Okay, so then it looks like this, and it has these little cute dog ears on the side, and we're going to trim our blocks so that we get rid of those little dog ears once we press all 32 of these blocks. Because I do like to do things the lazy way, sometimes I will leave those blocks on the ironing board and we'll just press one right on top of the other. Number one, it'll guarantee that the other one is on the bottom is laying flat. Number two, I can pick them all up at the same time. Oops, and just keep remembering dark side up top. So I want to iron and I want to press. I don't want to iron because again, I don't want to stretch my fabric if I can help it. Because the more ironing you do, sometimes you will stretch it out of shape a little bit. You're going to square them up or trim them up, but sometimes it's just easier not to distort them. You can press more than one at a time. It helps to lay your thread flatter, if you will. So I've been told. Press off. And again, no need to necessarily move anything. Because you can just press on top of the fabric. It's not going to hurt anything. And then just move this out the way. So there are 32 of these. So it does take a minute to press through all of them. I won't even say a minute, it takes a couple minutes. So we're trying very hard to press to one side. That's my goal. Press my fabrics to one side. I don't think I have a lot of nesting, if any, so I could open the seams. I just feel like it takes longer to do that. And I understand there are people who feel like it's flatter, the weight is evenly distributed on both sides of the seams to press them open, but I have not had a problem pressing them to one side and that not being okay with the quilt. But again, or the quilted pattern when I am piecing things together. But to each his own, whichever way you prefer to go. We'll just put one more on top and then we'll move all these over. And then I just have one more set to go and we will be done with this part of the process, and then we'll have to trim up or trim down because you can't trim up something if you're taking stuff off. So you're trimming down those. So we're just pressing and then pressing open. And again, not a whole lot of movement because I don't want to iron. And if you've been ironing as long as I have, and I don't mean like fabric, I just mean in general. Like if you've been using an iron for your clothes in the morning and things like that, it's just your natural thing to move that iron. So you're going to do it, you just don't want to do it a lot. So we're focusing on pressing, not on ironing. So really just getting in there, making sure that seam is laying as flat as possible to create that half square unit. Okay, we'll move these over here, and then we have our last 5 to go. That's 1. 2, whoops. 3. 4. And this is 5. Okay, so all of these are now done. Let that lay flat. And these are all of our half square triangles. So all of them have now been pressed. And why don't I see what I need? I'm going to, well, I do not see what I need. I found it. Been moving a couple things around today. So I am going to use my Tucker trimmer. So the Tucker trimmer is a tool that you can get that helps you with half square triangles and quarter square triangles. Typically, I can, see what's over here, because my other rulers don't do what I need them to do because they were cheap. Okay, one's gonna fall off. Okay, so typically for your rulers, let's start at the one. If you have a good ruler, there is a diagonal here. So what happens is you can take a square, because we want to trim them, and we can lay this here on the diagonal, right? So the diagonal is here, and we can lay this on the diagonal to whatever the measurements are that we want for the block. So if I want this block to be 4.5, I can get it to be on the first two sides just a little bit greater than 4.5, and then cut. Then I can turn this around, do the same thing, and cut again, and this time lining it up with 4.5 to do that. When I have a lot of blocks like this, or I do a lot of quilting, I should say, I prefer the Tucker trimmer because it's smaller, number one, and number two, it has all of the little designs, if you will, that you would need to make this just a little bit better. So I can line this up. My diagonal is still here, so lining that diagonal up right along the edge. Let me turn this around because this needs to be 4.5. Right now, it's a little bit bigger than 4.5. Most patterns will have you make that half square triangle just a little bit bigger than 4.5 so you can trim it to be exactly 4.5. And that's going to help because remember I said my squares were a different size. The dark squares were a different size from the colored squares. So this way I know that I am, going to hopefully get 4.5 inches for each one. Okay, so everything gets trimmed off and we have a great square. So of course you're gonna see it 32 more times, or 31 more times. And the better that you get at it, the faster you'll go, but this is not a race. So slow and steady wins the race, even though it's not a race, but you want slow and steady. So then that way, your blocks are just as greatly square as possible. There are other tools that are out there besides the Tucker tool. This is the one that I have. I went to a quilt show and they demoed this one, and I was like, yes, I have to have that because that doesn't take that much for me when it comes to getting a gadget or a tool that hopefully is going to make my life easier. And this one is absolutely making my life easier. Okay. What I am going to do, is stand up because your body weight on this helps to keep it steady. And you don't have to apply as much pressure with your rotary cutter. So it's a little tricky with seeing your markings through the darker blue, but if you pay attention, you can really see it. Now I won't be able to do this same trick with the next block that I need to work on. Well, actually, I probably could. Let's see if we can. So I'm just really making sure that I can see my 4.5, and I can see that on both sides, along with the diagonal. And if it's a little off, that's fine, because somebody was probably going crooked while she was sewing. The great thing is if I'm using those dog ears as a guide, even if I get a little thrown off, I know which end I need to do because the dog ear is still there. And, you know, looks like a little doggy, right? With those little ears. So I do like, there are people who will say, how come you're sitting down while you're cutting? Because you can. But technically, it helps to stand. Oops. Really taking, and again, my time to really measure these up, which is going to take me just a little bit longer than brushing. And I'm so used to sitting, I just prefer to do sitting. But again, you can stand. I'm a little off in this bottom corner, so I'm going to readjust it a little bit and then come back. And I'll show you. This corner looks like this, right to the corner. If you can see it, it is right to the corner, really. It's close enough to the corner. But if I come in with this one just a little bit, there's just a little bit I can shave off, right? And it's back to, and it's a little better to that corner. So for some people, like this, like, and then for me, right, I am not a person that loves half square triangles, because doing this is a lot. And it makes for a beautiful product. But, and then this is only 16, 32, right? 32. And if you were following the pattern, 24. But imagine if this were like the whole quilt. You would have a ton of these that you would have to trim. And again, like, you know, you're watching television, or listening rather. You're talking on the phone, and you're just going to sit there, and that's usually what I do, is just sit and trim while I'm mindlessly doing something, because it'll be the same thing over and over and over again. So the line up on the center, the trim of two sides, turn, line the line up and the 4.5-inch lines, and then trim the other two sides. Okay. So part of this table runner, again, this is a jewel table runner from Jordan Fabrics, designed by Donna Jordan, and this is like a Jacob's ladder. Um, so the block itself that we are making, and of the 4 blocks that we need to make, are made up of half square triangles and 4 patches. So those are the only 2 things that we have to make. And if you followed other videos that I have, we focused in January on making 4 patches and half square triangles. Because in some cases, a lot of the quilts that we make are going to have some form of patch and possibly half square triangles. Now there, of course, are quilts that have neither. It might be strip piecing, which is another common way to create quilts and quilt blocks. So once you learn the basics and you perfect the basics, then you can do just about anything. Once you understand how everything works together, how to alter it, you can make the pattern your own. Okay, I am tweaking this pattern a little bit because the pattern called for charm squares, and charm squares are 5-inch blocks that are packed up. So traditionally, pre-packaged, pre-cuts that you get from quilt shops or places that sell quilting fabric or quilting type fabric were, back in the day, the samples of the day. And in order to see all of the things that were in the collection, they could put them together like a fat quarter sampler, a charm pack, a mini charm pack, just so you could see that. And of course, there were people who, when you do that and you create those samplers, they're like, we're not wasting fabric. So they came up with these patterns that you could use with that sample fabric. And so then, you get things like the sample fabric for the jelly roll, or, for the charm pack or the layer cake. And here's the great thing. Usually, when the collection is created, everything plays well together. So you don't have to think, will this pattern go with this? Because usually, and I mean pattern like the pattern of the fabric, not the pattern that you're, making. But usually the colors play well together. They've been tested together. So you can mix and match that all up and it should look great because those colors will play well together. So a lot of times, some people, when they make quilts, will stick with a collection or with a specific collection name. Only a few out of there because they know that their patterns will play well together and those shades of color will play well together. But that doesn't mean that you have to use it. So you just have to understand what a 5-inch charm pack means, and if you have 12 of them, how does that convert to yardage? Or how does it convert to a fat quarter? So, for example, if a fat quarter is 18 inches by 22 inches, I know I can get 3 going across, because that would be 15 inches from the 18, and I can get 4 going down, because that's 20 inches, 4 times 5, from the 22. So that means that I can get a total of 12 charm squares out of one fabric. So if I can get 12 of them out of there, then that means that I can figure out the math to figure out how many charm squares I would need. Not charm squares. How many fat quarters I would need in order to make this. And that's the great thing, is that I can use up then a lot of the fat quarters that I may have, or scraps, yardage, and I can just figure out the math. Okay. So the same way would work, because half of a charm square is 2.5 inches. So when I figured out from this what I needed to do for the next part, for my 4-patch, I could figure out what I needed based off of 2.5 inch squares or jelly rolls, because those are 2.5, and it was easy enough to figure out the math for that. So, you can get your paper, you can figure out the math, figure out how it works, and then just go from there. Okay. But we're just lining up the last few. So we can just whip right through those. And there are other patterns that work similar to this, but a little bit different. But like I said, once you get the hang of this, those patterns then become a whole lot easier, because you understand how this works. We're lining everything up. And again, it's just totally up to you. I think if the table was a little bit taller, I wouldn't mind standing as much. I just feel like I'm hunching over. Not like I'm not hunching over at the table, but I feel like I'm really hunching over when I do it from a standing position. So I did get bed risers for my table upstairs. I haven't tried it yet, but that's the goal, to see if I can do it a little bit differently with that one. But I also wanted to see if those bed risers will hold up on the machine. So I don't want the machine tipping the table. Okay, I think I have 5 more to go with these. And then we can set these aside to work on our 4 patches. And there are, I believe, 4 patch in between. So there are just as many 4 patches as there are half square triangles. And again, this is jewel. This is a jewel box table runner. And this is from Jordan Fabrics. And this is a free pattern. Just switch it off just a little bit. I'm not going to leave that one alone. Okay, count. Okay. And again, the rule of thumb is to measure twice, cut once. Now, let's be honest. You can't cut more than once, because once you cut it, you've cut it. So unless you've cut it too big, there is no cutting it bigger after you've cut it smaller. So you get to measure twice. So making sure The line is lined up. I'm making sure it's within my 4.5. And then I'm cutting. Whoops. So I'm measuring twice. And I'm not necessarily talking myself through this, but I'm making sure that it reads what it's supposed to read, because I don't want to cut this block shorter. Like I said, if I cut it bigger, I can cut it down. If I cut it shorter, I'm done. Like, find some more fabric. This didn't press really well. I can feel the seam seam kind of rising on it, and I'm like, yeah, you may just want to press that just a little bit more. Okay. And I just really want to make sure that I give that a good press. Okay, much flatter. And we can line the line up, push it up as far as it'll go to make sure that we're not cutting off that 4.5. Turn this and do the same thing. And sometimes you're going to be like right on it. Like it said 4.5, and it's going to be 4.5. And I'm okay with that, as long as it doesn't say anything less than 4.5. Okay. And you can see, because you see how much was shaved off right near the edge, but not here. Okay. So all of my half square triangles are done. They are cut, pressed, and trimmed. And here's the trimming for all 32 of those. Would make like a great something, right? Look at those colors. They're going to go in my bucket because I can use them for a pillow. Okay. So traditionally, I said for this particular pattern, they had you cut out 2.5-inch squares from the charm pack. I did not use a charm pack, so I cut out 2.5-inch strips. What this is going to do, pull my machine back up, is that I can take these, bring these two together, because these are both 2.5-inch strips, and I can chain piece these onto these strips and then subcut 2.5-inch units. And I'll show you how we do that. Or, well, they'll be 2.5 one way, 4.5 the other. So then that way I'm not sewing together a whole bunch of little squares. Okay, I run out of space. Let's start the next one. Just make sure I have enough room there. Line everything up. That's a little longer. Let's see, the red might be short enough. So I'm just going down the length of the strip. And I may have some left over, and I may save that if I need it. But I want to cover as much of the strip as I possibly can. Okay. Let me show you what it looks like. So I have 3 different colors all in the same one. And let's just do one more. So these are all different sizes because again, I am using scraps. So whatever I had that was available to me to trim into 2.5-inch strips is what I used. Now I will say, when you do strip piecing, the thing with strip piecing is that when you subcut, you are cutting the seam, the thread, and so a lot of pulling will cause those seams to come undone. You won't have that problem if you do individual squares, because you'll backstitch, or you'll have enough thread left at the end for the tails so that that doesn't happen, even though it still could happen, but there's a greater percentage that that won't happen, probability that that won't happen if you do it the way that they tell you to. But like I said, they're telling you to do it that way because they're starting off with charm squares that they're changing into what should have been strips into boxes. Okay, this is short, so let's use a short one. Oh, that's not short. Oh, that's really long. That's long, so we'll use one of these. Okay, so let's do a third one. So yellow was really long, and purple was really long. And I may not need all of these. So here's another one. So that's 3 colors on there. Now my purple is, this is really long because, yeah, I think I went outside of the stash for this. So we're just going to set those back over there. And we'll do one more. Now I know I'm going to need more, but I just want to start with these just so that we can see how this works. Because the goal today is to at least get the block done, and if not, the whole table runner top. Okay. Now I did not mean to put the purple on the bottom and the blue on the top, but we're gonna rock with it. You can see now I can't see when it ends, but that's okay. Because I'll just start this one underneath of here, right where that left off. And then we can just continue to go. Okay, see how much of a tail we have left from that. And again, like when I get down to these ends, I can absolutely use them for the individual squares. So we'll cut those out if we need them. Okay, let's slide this one out the way. Of course, I have like 15,000 things in front of the ruler. And it's like glued down. Okay. So now what I can do with this, the first thing I want to do, I can either press these open, and I'll show you both ways. I can measure this, cut off the end just to get rid of the ragged edge. Everything is lined up 2.5 inches. All right. Now I can turn this sideways and I can find 2.5. And I have a smaller ruler, but it's not down here. But I can find 2.5 with this. And cut. So I'm subcutting these into 2.5 inch units wide. It's going to be 4.5 inches long. So instead of sewing those individual squares together, this way I can just subcut them. This requires me to pay attention to the sizing. Measure twice, cut once. Actually, this ruler has an intersection that actually has 2.5. So why I'm not using that side, I don't know. That's the right. Okay. Pay attention, girl. Pay attention. Yep. 0. Make sure I did that right. Okay. So we have a lot of this left over. Let me get that out of there. So again, I can line this up. And matter of fact, let me show you the other way. So I can do this like this, and then I'll get a piece that looks like this, right? Or I can open it up and do the same thing. It doesn't matter. It's personal preference. You're still going to have to press these. Let me just press them. I'm going to flatten the thread because that's what they said. If you do that, it'll roll over better. I don't know whether that's necessarily true or not, but I do it. It feels like it works, so why not? Okay. So it'll be open like this, and I can still line everything up. I just prefer not to use that end. I'm used to using the whole inch just because I see it better, but you could use whichever side you want. Line everything up. Cut off that excess. Yeah, it doesn't even line up all the way. So now I have a nice straight edge. Let me turn this towards me because it's easier to cut it that way. Show you a couple different ways we can do this. I just thought about that. We're lining everything up on 2.5 and cut. And there's our final unit. We'll set that aside. Now, of course, I took these. Make sure they're not underneath there, which they were. I know I was getting ready to cut them. So I can do it one at a time. Or I could line everything up. Let me slide this over just a little bit. Okay, we'll save this, so I may need it. And I can fold this in half, like that. Make sure everything is lined up. And now this time I can do them by twos. So it's just a quicker way of getting it done. But just make sure that your accuracy is just about there. So you want everything lined up, measure twice, and then cut. If you feel like your accuracy may be off, I would suggest going up a little bit, like a hair, because it'll be easier to trim down that quarter square triangle, that 4 patch, than it will be if you make it too short. Okay, yep, okay. And then this last one, I can open up. Sometimes these will be off. So I'm just going to trim it to get it nice and even again. And it looked like it was just about even to me. So, oh well. And then we will do this last one. Again, making sure that I am at the measurements I should be at. And then cut that off. It's going to go on my scrap pile. Okay, so then I have all of these units done so far. And I come back to these units. So the way that I did these, I cut them one by one, but of course now here comes the moment when you have to open them all up and press them. So, the pressing worked a little bit faster because you press the whole unit at one time. But again, it's up to you which way you prefer to go. So you absolutely can prefer to do them one by one. You can prefer to do them all at one time. It's whatever works best for you. Now I am trying to make sure. Press towards the wrong side. Oh, not the end of the world. So if I catch it, I can fix it. I press towards this side. Did I do the same thing over here? No. The rest of them I press towards the dark side. So I press towards the colored side. So I can change that if I like. Again, it's not the end of the world if you do it that way. It just means that if you are trying to nest your seams, you won't be able to nest that one. So if I care, I just push it in the other direction. And now it's pressed towards the dark side. I'll lay it down on top of each other so then that way I don't have to worry about. Okay. So we're going to just cut these apart. I still have this one that I have to do. Purple and red. Let's go ahead and cut those off. Because I'll show you a different way. Because it depends on the tools that you have with how many different ways you can cut this. So we're going to press these open. It's just easier, right? Like that was much easier to press that whole unit than to take each individual part and press them. But again, your preference, the way that you choose to do it. That's two. the dark on the top. That way it's easier to flip it so that the seam goes to the dark side. Okay. Okay. And 2 more. So again, I'm laying it on the dark side. And then when I open it up, hopefully it's just a little bit flatter. And I'm pressing, even though there is some ironing, but I'm not going all over the place. I'm going to do the red. And I still, like, I did some extra ones, so I don't know. I have to count. We'll see what we have left over, what we need, what we don't need, because I didn't necessarily need all of the strips. So it called for 12 of the charm packs, and I would have to do the math. 12 times 5 is 60. So that's probably like 3 strips. Somewhere around there. Two to 3 strips. Wrong thing. Okay. So I have all these cut now. If you have the pleasure of having a stripology ruler, and these have all these little slits, and they are at a 1/2 inch each. You can use your stripology ruler, which will make your cutting even faster. Don't that look crooked? Let's see, just looked a little crooked. Okay. So we line it up using our stripology ruler. It looks a little wavy. So if it looks a little wavy, I'm just trying right now to unwave it. And I may have to heat up the iron just to do it a little bit. And see, that came from ironing and not completely pressing. And if it looks too wavy, I'll just come back to it if I need it. It's like right here, it's off a little bit, and it's off camera. You can't really see that. So I'm going to go right to where it's not wavy. Okay. 5. We'll come down just a little bit. But you could use your stripology ruler, and you could cut at every 2.5 inches. Okay. And then that way, you'll have all these done. And it'll be done a lot faster than if you were using your regular ruler. So you can choose to do this with any ruler that you prefer. Remember, everything has to be 2.5 inches. Okay. That piece is big enough to save. I'll set that aside. Line everything up, right on the edge. And there are marks on the ruler that let me know exactly where 2.5 inches are. So that means that I don't have to measure twice. I just need to make sure that I'm right within those marks. Okay. And I will put all the links in for everything within about, say before this evening on here. Well, it's not quite. Purple. And it's just like, you can see how like this is making it much faster than it was when I was doing it with the individual rulers. So this is one of the reasons why I like the stripology ruler, is that you could make your units, in some cases, a lot faster than you can if you do them with individual rulers. Okay. There's a pink one left to go. So just lining everything up. Okay, 10, 7.5. And you won't make it to 5. So we get 2 more out of that one. 1, 2. And I can save this for something. What's to know me is to know. I'll throw scraps away. I don't think, did I use, oh, okay, just messed up my half square triangle pile. Well, that's fine. Yeah, press that open and do that one too. Grab the wrong thing. I said press and then grab the iron, and I meant to grab the stripology ruler. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oops. Save that for rainy day. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So we have all our pieces here. We'll press this one again. So it's 4 in each one. So 4, 16. 16 is 32. And I doubt very seriously I did 32. And I just want to get this a little bit over the edge just to make sure everything is lined up. Okay, for that first cut. Okay. So these 3. That was too small to do anything with, so I shredded it for my shredding pile. Okay. I might have enough. Yep, you have enough. Okay, you have more than enough. Okay. Do I have a lot of orange? No. Okay. So we're going to take these. And we will set these aside because we don't need them. Let's move the other project out the way. That's for later. Okay. So these are the units. So far we've caught up to what we had in the other pattern. Because the other pattern we would have sewn, I mean, according to the pattern, we would have sewn a color to the background. So now we're going to mix and match. And we're going to turn them in opposite directions until we have 16 units. Like I said, for the pattern it's 12, for me it's 16. So I'm going opposite directions, color up top, color down the bottom. I'm going to put the two seams together and nest them. That's why I want to press to the dark side, because then the seams are going in opposite directions. Line everything up, and we'll take it to the machine and we will stitch. And again, be careful, because this is where you could pull a little hard on those seams and they'll come apart on you. So just take your time, work gently with them, and don't pull too hard. If there is a preference, light to dark, mix that up with that. If you don't want yellows with yellows, or oranges with oranges, or purples with purples, just make sure you have all that together. So I can like get rid of like my purples. What I don't want to end up with is two purples together. I don't care if I have two prints together. I don't care if I have two that read solid together. What I care about is having two of the same thing together. So I don't want two purples together, and I don't want two of the same print. And I think that's why it also helps to make a few extra, if you can. If not, you absolutely could pre-put everything together to make sure that they do what they're supposed to do, and then you don't have to do them random like I'm doing now. So that's totally up to you which way you want to go. Okay, nest those seams together. And we're just taking them, nesting them, and sewing them together. And remember, we're not trying to pull too hard as to separate those seams. And I'll show you an example of one just so you can see. Let me me see, I'll pick up the yellow one. And I think because that's bright enough to see it. Oops. Okay. Oops. Turn it the right way. Let me line this up. That's them. Okay. So see right here where my finger is, like that's where the end of your thread is. So if you pull, it's going to come out. So you just want to make sure that you're tenderly using them so you don't pull them out. It's inevitable, it might happen. And then you may have to stitch back over. The seam to get it to go into place, so it's not the end of the world, but you don't want to have to do that with every single one. So just take your time. And that just comes from subcutting. So again, it might take me longer to put each block together. But I wouldn't have as many being pulled apart. And all of them, just about, unless they were an end, look the same. Getting messages on my watch. Okay, the last green is going in the line. So again, I'm going to keep an eye on my purple and keep an eye on my orange, because those are the two that I either don't want something with something that is going to look alike. So I want to make sure. And you can see we're just about getting to the end. I could put the orange and the orange together, but I just feel like they're so close. There were a couple of these that I did not I did not press in the right direction. And I think, I don't know why. I don't know why I may have done that, but that's okay. Because it's not the end of the world for them not to be nested. You just want to make sure everything is lined up. Okay, purple to the orange. Okay. Orange to the pink. So we made it. And again, I have some extra ones in here, so I'm probably not going to be too concerned. Just make sure that I'm not using all of them up. So we are making the 4-patch for this particular block. We already made our half square triangles earlier, and you can see like there's a lot less effort to these. You don't have to write on them, you don't have to draw on them for like you do with the half square triangles. You don't have to draw on either side of the line. You don't have to sew on either side of the line. You're not cutting them in half after you sew them. So once you're done your stitches, you're done your stitches. And here we go, little flags. Okay. So we're going to snip these, take them over to our iron. You can either press them to one side or press them open. Again, that's personal preference. They're going to naturally go to one side just because of the nesting, but you can absolutely do what you prefer. Okay, and we'll have this. And there's a little bit of trimming that we may need to do or not. I should have 16, right? So just snipping all of those to get them apart, because that'll be a little bit easier. Slide this back over here. We're opening this up. Like I said, if we did the nesting, they'll automatically want to go to one side. And I'm just pressing it down in place. And you can see the 4-patch. Okay. So again, when I open it up, they want, whoop, almost burnt myself for that one. These are not in the same direction. These, I didn't nest these, I don't think, or did I? Yes, I did. Okay. There were like 3 or 4 of them that I didn't nest. Okay, pressing those seams down. And the good thing is that like this is one that I didn't nest. So I had them both going in the same direction. And again, that's fine. If they won't do it, I can either press them open or press them to whatever side. You can see with this one, it's a little off center. I'm not worried about it, but if it matters, that will be one that I'll set aside. And that was because this was one of the ones that I did not do what I was supposed to do. Now the hope is that we should be able to move through these quickly. So we're just pressing. And that's the good thing about the subcut is that it allows us to open up that seam so that they twirl. And I'll show you. See how they twirl? So everything is just laying flat. And like I said, I know I did a few more than what I was supposed to do. And that's fine. Okay. And we'll get through all of those. But I love how they're laying And I think it's because it's batik. And it's not because it's quilter's cotton. And it's not because it's purity luck. Like I said, as it opens, it's just naturally going in the direction that it's supposed to go into, or that I want it to go into. If there is a little bit of fudge that needs to happen, then the good thing is that I could use my spray starch. I use Best Press. I do use quite a few of them. Um, Whatever's on hand, whatever they have in the shop that I'm purchasing from, that's what I get. I will use Faultless as well. But my suggestion is do your starching before you cut your fabric, because you want to get all the moisture that you can to pre-shrink your fabric ahead of time, because you don't want these units to shrink as you are trying to piece them together, because they can make your unit lessen the unit that you need, and then that will create some problems for you. Okay. So I do want to measure these to make sure that they are 4.5 inches. And if they're not, or they're a little off, I can trim off that little extra. And I just want to make sure, because if they're off just a little bit, I can work it. If they're off a lot, there's no help. So just a little bit will help. If they're off completely, it won't. So all of these that are a little longer, thank God, they're going to work. This is really off. I want to get real close, because I can straighten this up with the other block and then make it work. I just need to make sure my seams are straight in order for that to happen. This is way off. I think I'm going to hold off on that one. Don't ask me how that happened. So we're going to try the ones that look halfway decent. And that was in my cutting. That was on me. But I can still make them work. So if I don't have to use a wonky one, I won't use a wonky one. But if I need to use the wonky one, we will pull that out of the, if you don't have to use it, we won't use it pile. So we have 5 so far. Six. And I think like the wonkiness is coming from the fact that I use two different rulers. So time and time again, folks will tell you, do not use two different rulers. And time again, they won't listen. And then I get wonky and I wonder why. Well, I don't wonder why because I know why, but I get wonky because two different rulers have slightly different measurements. And they shouldn't. And I could have used one ruler. And then I want to say that my stripology ruler, I think I was off on that one just a little bit. Okay, I'm going to hold off on that one, and then we're going to count and see if we have 16. Okay, it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Okay. Here's my other stuff back here. I should not need my stripology ruler. I'll take that off the table. Okay. So again, we're working on the jewel box table runner. And we're going to make sure that this is the block that we get now. Okay. So any two colors, clearly not the same two. And I'm going to stack these so they're going to look like that. I don't care if the pink, like if they touch. I don't want two of them to touch. So that'll be one unit. Okay, so again, I can have these. Okay, it's 2 oranges. I don't want to do that. Okay. And we're just stacking them so that we're seeing what they look like. Ahead of time. And it really doesn't matter that I didn't stack this over here. What matters is because of the way that I'm going to sew them together. I just want to make sure that I have one of each. So I don't want to mess myself up. Now, how I ran out of these and didn't run out of these, I don't know. $16 because that only gave me 8. So that gave me 2 blocks. So I need more of these. So we'll finish these up offline, but we'll get these units together because I still need to then make more of these because somebody can't count. Make sure that okay. So we still have these. We still have plenty of fabric. We have these left over. Somebody can't count somewhere. So we'll hold off on those. And then we'll put these together. These are going to go together in 4 patches. So this is going to get flipped over onto this. This is going to get flipped over onto this. And then we'll sew everything together. So what I'll do is I'll do a second part for this to finish this, but I'll show you how the blocks come together. So I'm going to take this and flip this over, take this one and flip that over. We're going to line everything up because we squared them up to be 4 inches, 4.5. So we're going to do 4 of these. Because that'll give us what we want. I may do all of them because I may need to think about. Okay, let's flip over the second set. Line everything up. Oh. This is when your machine tells you, girl, it is time to take a break. Okay. Move that over for a second. Nope, it wasn't that. So then that means it was only the tension up top, the tension on. No, it's not that. Let's try this again and see. Okay, first of all, it's not longer threaded. Let me check one more thing though. Nope, it's in there. Yeah, this may have been a fluke. And we're just going to go through the eye. And we'll try this again. And we'll see if it's my machine going crying uncle or just a fluke. And like I said, it may be telling me, girl. But so far, so good. Okay. So we'll do this one. flip this over. I think I should be okay to do the 4. Again, you still need to be careful because you do have edges exposed that are still fragile because we cut them, we subcut them. So don't get in the habit of pulling because you thought you're safe now. You're not. Let's do this one. And we'll do this one. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so we are going to take this and this with this and this. And the only reason I'm going to put them is because I went through the hassle of separating them, and at least we want to keep them separated. Okay, so we'll slide those up there. All those will go in that corner. Okay. I think when I was thinking my math, I was thinking of them as a block and not thinking of them as a smaller unit and not as a block. So that's where I mentally screwed my math up because it wouldn't be 16 of those units. It would be 32 of those units. So it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So it'd be 16. So this is 16. And let me see. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right. So it's 8, 16, which is where I stopped. And I should have gone to 24. And then if I do an extra 132. So I need 16 more of these to finish them. So I have enough of these. I just don't have enough of those. But like I said, I'll do those offline and we'll come back and we'll put it together because basically at this point, what you see is what's going to happen anyway in putting everything together. So whether I have the 8 that I have, I'm only going to do 4 of them that are completed. We're going to get at least the 1 block done so that you can see the 1 block, and then all the rest of the blocks are going to come together the same way. So I did leave the units linked together just so that they stay together. That way I don't mix up the colors and then end up with 2 together that I worked so hard to make sure I didn't do. I am pressing these seams open. Personal preference. You absolutely could press them to one side. Because then that would help you to nest these because again, we're going to put these together. These are going together like a 4 patch. and then one more. And then we'll be able to sew these together, press these, and then put the 4 together to create the block. So these within themselves are a block, and then what we're creating is a bigger block. So again, these are almost like Jacob's ladder. Okay. So they're pressed. We're just going to line those up like that. So we're going to take the seams this time, line them up. You can use a clip to clip them together. And do the same thing for the other 4. The good thing about leaving them together in pairs is that you also don't have to worry about accidentally rotating them and then needing to pick everything apart because you sewed them together wrong. And they should go together when you do this. Is it possible that you could have messed it up like I can? Sure. But this will help to minimize that chance. Okay, so these will go together. We're going to sew these 4 units. And again, you're still dealing with an open side that possibly could split on you. So still be careful to not pull your fabric so you don't separate those seams. Okay, that's 1. That's 2. Three. Okay. We need to press these. But just so you can see, here is the block. So traditionally, like these would be the blocks, right, that we would have. But we're going to create a secondary block from this when we put these in order. And then, like I said, I can do, like, they're all done the same way. So we can do the rest of them offline. And then I will post a video to show the completion of this. Oops. If it doesn't want to lay down, just a quick spray, and that should help to lay that down a little bit. Okay, so that's one. And I don't know why, like, the pain of my existence is for me to open up seams. I prefer to keep them to one side. Don't ask me why. I challenge myself to do it any other way. I'm going to press them to one side. I don't like getting in between the seam and trying to separate them. It requires a little bit more effort to make sure that they are nice and flat on the other side. But I prefer that than trying to open them. Okay, that's two. And then we have one more after this one. And for some ungodly reason, I decided to go back to opening them. Like I said, they just lay flatter. You don't have that problem. I like the nesting, but I don't like. But the one thing that it does do is it gives me a little hump. And I don't necessarily want that little hump. Okay, the other one I did close. I'll do this one closed. Press to one side. Because you can mix and match if you want. So traditionally we stay with one side, one way, but it's a table runner. Okay. Just slide that back for a second. Slide my extras. Okay. So just for giggles. And I wouldn't have those two matching together, but you could do an X. Or you can do an O. Okay. I just wanted to get these two blues away from each other. So then these all get sewn together, and this is the final block. So we would sew this together the same way we would a 4-patch. We're going to flip these over here, sew, and then press, and then sew, and then it'll be done. And then every other block will look like this one. And again, unless you feel some kind of way about certain colors being far enough away from each other, I'm okay with that as long as they don't touch. because I use scraps, and I knew that the scraps would eventually limit the opportunities that I had. I want all of my seams to line up. Okay, that's one. And again, I could hold this with my hand. I don't have to do this with clips, but sometimes I prefer clips. Okay. I'll take this back. I'm trying to figure out. I have a, like when you don't bring the map inside the house, I have a quilt shop out. And I was wondering if one of the quilt shops was in Virginia or was it in Maryland? And I don't know. Because I feel like when I was going to the ones, some of them, they were not. They were in Virginia, and then we had to go in Virginia, out of Virginia, in Virginia, out of Virginia. So I can't remember if one was in Virginia or not. But I can find that out when I go to the car. It stopped raining. Okay. We'll take these. We'll bring these together. I did decide to nest these, so I didn't open the seams. Clip once they're nested. Line these seams up. Clip. And the bigger the block gets, the more clipping I do. The smaller the unit, the less clipping I'll do, because I can hold that with my hands. With these, I can't necessarily hold them with my hands. Okay. And here we go. So here is the final block minus the pressing for that center, but this is what it will look like. So I will make the other 4 blocks. Like I said, we'll go and finish the 4 patches that I didn't do And I'll finish these, and then I will do a quick part two video to show what the final block will look like with the borders and everything done. So stay tuned, because we will finish the Jewel Blocks table runner. It is a free table runner by um, Donna Jordan for Jordan Fabrics, and it absolutely comes together perfectly, even scrappy. So stay tuned. Thank you for staying and joining along with me today. I truly appreciate everyone, even through my little mishap. But you know, it would have taken even longer to do this one. So I'll either do a part two live, or I'll do a separate video. Well, one of the ways you'll see it. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, again, thank you everyone for this part one, and stay tuned for part two.